This video is long overdue. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Clyde Park Church of the Nazarene. This is a long awaited sequel to my last video introducing Old Testament wisdom. In this video, I will discuss wisdom as it appears in the New Testament. If you enjoy this video and topic, make sure to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more Clyde Nazarene content. Now, of course, the biggest difference between the testaments is Jesus, so I think it's appropriate to start with him as it pertains to wisdom. Firstly, Jesus is depicted as a wise teacher. Newell writes, Jesus taught in the tradition of a wisdom teacher in Israel. He rarely used scholarly or technical language. He employed wisdom sayings, including puns, similes, metaphors, and proverbs, sometimes in extended discourses. None of these techniques were unknown in the culture, and he used them with proficiency. The style of Jesus' teachings was that of a wise sage of ancient Israel. Jesus associates his teachings with wisdom as well. For example, it is written, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock." Matthew 7:23. The person who builds their life on Jesus' teachings is a wise man. This is a fascinating statement given the context of the day. Judaism usually associated wisdom with the Torah. For example, it is written, "See that I have taught you decrees and laws as the Lord my God commanded me, so that you may follow them in the land you are entering to take possession of it. Observe them carefully, for this will show your wisdom and understanding to the nations, who will hear about all these decrees and say, 'Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people.'" Deuteronomy 4:5-6. This tradition continued into the Second Temple period. If you don't know, the Second Temple period is that section of time in Judaism where the Second Temple was built and used after the destruction of the First Temple. During this time, Judaism continued developing, and so did notions of wisdom. One extra biblical Jewish wisdom book states, "Whoever fears the Lord will do this, and whoever holds to the law will obtain wisdom." Sirach 15:1. Chapter 24 of the same book has a section dedicated to relating wisdom to the law of Moses. However, Jesus associates wisdoms with his teachings, not the law. Now, to be clear, this is not unusual or contrary to the law being full of wisdom. As noted in the last video, Solomon receives wisdom from God, and his teachings get written down. The fact that Solomon was a sage who shared wisdom with the community does not negate the wisdom of the law. Rather, the wisdom of the law and of persons find God as their common source. Jesus further associates himself with wisdom when he indicates that he is greater than Solomon in terms of wisdom. Matthew 12:42. It is written, "But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God." 1 Corinthians 1:24. Paul says in verse 30, "It is because of him that you are in Christ Jesus, who has become for us wisdom from God, that is, our righteousness, holiness, and redemption." What exactly does this mean? To be wisdom itself. Paul explains in verse 30, which was just quoted. Righteousness, holiness, and redemption explain God's wisdom. Using these terms, Paul has now redefined wisdom to be virtually synonymous with salvation. See Champa and Rosner 2020 for more on that. The Expositor's Bible commentary elaborates, arguing that wisdom is in the plan of God for salvation accomplished on the cross. Christ is God's wisdom because he and his work in the plan are fundamental to the plan of salvation. As Paul writes, "If Christ had not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith." First Corinthians 15:14. The association between Jesus and wisdom may also have something to do with creation. Some scholars argue that the New Testament authors associate Proverbs 8, a chapter personifying wisdom as a female creator, with Jesus, Shields 2016. However, the New Testament never borrows the language from Proverbs 8, suggesting that they might make a general identification between wisdom and Jesus rather than Proverbs 8 specifically. Again, see Shields 2016. So here's a question. Who is wise? Well, in James chapter 3, it is written, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder in every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is, first of all, pure, then peace loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness." Apostle James says that the evidence someone has divine wisdom is a moral, virtuous, and righteous life. In this, he parallels Deuteronomy and other Hebrew Bible texts that identify wisdom as God's commands. Because to be a moral, virtuous, and righteous person is to, at least in part, follow God's commands. For James, boasting or denying a sin or evil that rests within us is immoral and unwise. That said, how does one become wise? The New Testament gives us a few ways. One of those ways is Jesus' teachings. It is written in Matthew 7, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house upon the rock." Thus, you learn to be wise by practicing and not just hearing, but by practicing and doing the words of Jesus. Number two is prayer. In James 1, it is written, "If any of you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double minded and unstable in all they do." James tells us that we can pray for wisdom and God will give it to us, like with King Solomon. However, we have to ask correctly, namely in belief. And thirdly, a moral life. As we saw in James 3, practicing a moral life is how one becomes and shows their wisdom. Now, what is human wisdom? You'll find people saying, "Oh, I don't want to participate in this. This is human wisdom," so on and so forth. This is the philosophy of man, or something like that. But as we saw in the book of James, human wisdom is unrighteousness, especially boasting or denying said unrighteousness. But this is not the only time human wisdom is talked about. For example, Colossians 2:8 states, "See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the elemental spiritual forces of this world rather than on Christ." Later in Colossians 2, Paul refers back to the elemental spiritual forces and says, "Since you died with Christ to the elemental spiritual forces of the world, why, as though you still belonged to the world, do you submit to its rules? Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch." These rules are based on merely human commands and teachings. Such regulations indeed have the appearance of wisdom with their self imposed worship, their false humility, and their harsh treatment of the body, but they lack any value in restraining sensual indulgence. So, the hollow and deceptive philosophy based on human tradition and elementary forces are religious rules. Is it religious rules in general? No. considering that Paul himself makes religious rulings, of course. So the reference is likely the extra rules that Jews made up on top of the Mosaic Law. See McKnight 2018. This makes sense with Paul's critique here in other Pauline writings. In numerous passages, Jesus also critiques the Jewish laws of his day, Matthew 12, 1 through 7. These religious rules are vain human wisdom, not divine wisdom. Notice too that Paul says that they have a harsh treatment of the body and they lack value in restraining sensual indulgence. These religious rules and regulations that we put on ourselves and our bodies are not only just a part of human wisdom and teachings and bad, but also they don't actually do the thing that people want them to do, which is to restrain indulgence. Let me make some conclusions and some applications. Number one, Jesus is a very wise teacher and taught as such. Number two, Jesus is wisdom itself, meaning salvation. Number three, we become wise through prayer, living morally, and learning Jesus' teachings. And number four, human wisdom is harmful religious rules slash traditions and immoral life. Now, what are some applications that could be made from these summary points? If you don't know, purity culture is a set of beliefs and practices, often within the Christian circle, that emphasize sexual abstinence, until marriage. Now, that might not be so bad. Many of us want to say that we should abstain until marriage. However, purity culture does a number of extra things that become a problem. And I think one of the things it does is that fourth point that we talked about. It adds extra human rules and traditions that actually become harmful, often to a person's body, but also harmful to them in other ways. An example of this could be very strict modesty. You can only wear dresses and only certain types of dresses. You can't even kiss a person of the opposite sex until marriage. Your worth and value is tied to whether or not you have abstained until marriage and how well you've abstained, regardless of whether or not abstaining was your choice or not. So, purity culture is not only unbiblical, but according to the principles of scripture that we just extracted in this video, harmful to a person's body and does the opposite of the things that it wants to do. So, as Christians, we should do what we can to live according to the moral life as set out in the Bible, but reject anything like purity culture, which often looks more like this human wisdom than it does divine wisdom. Another application I would make to you is pray. Pray that God would help you figure out how to live morally in your context. What wisdom does God have for you? These are the kinds of things that you can and should ask God about. A final application that I will make is that Jesus is our salvation. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And in him and through him, we receive wisdom. So I would encourage you that on those times and days where it is really hard and for any number of reasons, I would encourage you to run to Jesus, to run to your salvation, to run to wisdom. That said, I really hope you enjoyed this video. This video was a long time coming. I should have gotten it out sooner, and all sorts of things happened, and I just wasn't able to. But I want to try to stick to a schedule, and so I am saying this now. I want you guys to be able to look forward to this. I want to release at least one video, maybe two videos a month for both June and July. So, sometime next month, I should have a teaching video out just like this for you guys to enjoy. That said, if you like this video, make sure to subscribe to the Clyde Park Church and Nazarene YouTube channel and to check out our other content. We do live streams of our services every Sunday, and I try my best to upload weekly to the platform. Thank you again, and God bless.